Before we begin, I'd like to ask you for a small favor. I'm working really hard to reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. It's a truly important milestone for me. Please click the subscribe button on the channel. It's just one click, but it gives me massive motivation to keep making more videos. Thank you all so much. Marta, let's be honest. You were never a woman for big money. Camille's words hung over the table like a cracked chandelier, still clinging on, but everyone knew it was about to fall. The restaurant was elegant, the kind where waiters moved more silently than a person's thoughts, and the portion on the plate looked as if the chef feared the customer might actually get full. Outside, city lights flickered like distant constellations, candlelight glinted in the glasses, and at a nearby table, a woman chuckled softly to a man in a navy suit. Marta Wysocka wasn't chuckling at all. She looked at Camille calmly, with a stillness that many mistook for subservience. She wore a simple beige dress, a delicate gold chain, and a coat bought 3 seasons prior during a sale. Her hair was pulled back low, without excessive fuss. She didn't look like the kind of woman discussed in the hushed halls of tech conferences. She didn't look like someone who could halt a multi-million złoty investment with a single phone call. And that was precisely why Kamil felt safe with her. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly. Kamil Brzezinski adjusted his shirt cuff. He always did that when he was about to say something that sounded like a sensible decision, but was merely elegantly dressed egoism. "Don't be offended," he began, his tone suggesting he already knew he would offend, but wanted an alibi. "We simply need to look at the future realistically. I have a business, contacts, obligations. I've built my position over years. And you, well, you're great at what you do, truly. But consulting, especially for small businesses, isn't something that provides the stability I'm aiming for." Marta lowered her gaze to the napkin. White, perfectly folded, without a single crease. Interesting, she thought. How much does silence cost here? Because her silence had already cost dearly. Years of their relationship, dozens of family dinners, where Camille's mother would smile patronizingly and say, "The most important thing is for a woman to be sensible, not to push herself where she doesn't belong." Hundreds of small remarks Camille tossed out as jokes. Marta and luxury. She'd get lost in a Mercedes showroom. "My fiancé is practical. She doesn't need much." Marta isn't the type of woman who understands big risks. Each time, she'd offer a faint smile. Not because it didn't hurt. It did, but she had learned that not every truth needs to burst out with a bang and fireworks. Sometimes, truth sits quietly in a corner, waiting for someone to hand it a microphone. Camille was doing just that. "I understand," Marta said. "I knew you'd be mature about this." He smiled with relief, as if he had already won the conversation. "That's exactly why I value you. You're not demanding." Marta felt a momentary urge to laugh, not out of amusement, but because the absurdity had reached a point where one didn't know whether to cry or ask the waiter for popcorn. Camille ran a credit consulting firm. On his website, he posed with clasped hands against the backdrop of a glass office building he didn't own. He drove a leased black Mercedes, which he called "my car," though it belonged more to the bank than to him. He wore a watch, bought on installments and suits, whose tags he removed only after ensuring no one would notice the brand. To the world, he was a success story. To Marta, he was a man terrified of someone looking beneath the polished surface. And she truly did consulting, not because she had to, but because she enjoyed helping small businesses navigate the digital maze. She liked the elderly owner of the bike shop, who called every program "this computer." She liked the bakery in Jesuits for whom she created a simple online ordering system. She liked real people, real problems, and that moment when someone would say, "Ms. Marta, now I finally understand." But there was another Marta. the one Camille didn't know. Marta, who 8 years earlier had developed a system for automating online sales for medium-sized businesses. Initially, she worked late nights in a small rented room with a laptop that got so hot it could replace a radiator in winter. Then came the first clients, then an investor, then a partial buyout by a large tech company. Money came faster than she could get used to it. First, she bought an apartment for herself, then another for rent, then a small commercial space in Wrocław, then shares in the company developing her system. Then came more investments, handled cautiously, without flashes of paparazzi bulbs or champagne photos on LinkedIn. Her net worth exceeded 27 million złoty, yet Camille only saw her old Toyota, and perhaps that was why she had stayed with him for so long. She wanted to believe someone could love her without knowing about her money, without being impressed by her assets, without calculations. After a childhood spent amidst parental arguments, a mother who nickel-and-dimed her father, and a father who disappeared for days because money was all anyone talked about at home, Marta had sworn one thing to herself: she would never buy love. That's why she remained silent when Camille commented on her car, when his friends asked if she minded that he was more ambitious, when his future mother-in-law declared Marta should be grateful, as Camille offered her a name and stability. A name? Stability. Marta felt like asking if stability could be paid via standing order, because if so, she could afford a family plan. But she said nothing, until this evening. Camille reached for a leather briefcase lying next to his chair. He placed it on the table, with the air of a man about to bestow a favor and call it good sense. "I've prepared something," he said. "I don't want you to take this the wrong way." Marta looked at the briefcase. "What is it?" "A prenuptial agreement project." In the restaurant, someone dropped a fork. The metallic clatter cut through the air. Marta didn't flinch. Camille slid the documents toward her. "It's standard for people at my level," he added quickly. "It's just about protecting assets. My assets. We can't pretend we're starting from the same place." Marta slowly placed her hand on the papers. She hadn't opened them yet. She looked at Camille for a long time, at his perfectly styled hair, at the confidence that was too loud to be genuine, at the man who wanted to test her, even though for 2 years he himself had failed the simplest test, the test of respect. "So you're afraid I'll marry you for money?" she asked. Camille sighed. "Marta, don't oversimplify. I'm simply being responsible." "Responsible," she repeated. "Yes, and honestly, if you truly loved me, you wouldn't have a problem with this." That sentence hit her harder than all the previous ones, because it contained everything: a condition, contempt, an attempt at control. Marta opened the briefcase, her eyes skimming the first page, then the second. The further she read, the more she understood this wasn't just a prenuptial agreement. It was a document drafted by a man who didn't want a partner. He wanted a guarantee that if anything happened, she would leave quietly, with no right to question, no right to anything, even if after marriage she sacrificed her own career, time, and life for their shared home. She closed the briefcase. Camille watched her intently. "So?" he asked. Marta looked up. There were no tears on her face. No shouting, not even anger. There was a calm, the worst kind for people who count on someone's weakness. "Fine," she said. Camille blinked. "Fine. We'll sign the prenup." A triumphant smile spread across his face. "I knew you were sensible." Marta gently pushed the briefcase back towards him, but with one condition. Camille's smile faltered slightly. "What condition?" Marta reached for her water glass and took a small sip. "Full financial transparency, from both sides. Before signing, we show everything: accounts, loans, liabilities, shares, Properties, investments. You show your documents, I'll show mine. For a second, Camille stared at her, as if he hadn't understood. Then he let out a short laugh. Of course. No problem. Marta nodded. Excellent. She added nothing more. She didn't tell him that he had just asked to open a door, behind which lay 27 million złoty, several property deeds, company shares, and a truth that would shatter his pride to pieces. That evening, Camille returned home, convinced he had secured his future. Marta returned calm, because she knew that sometimes justice doesn't enter a room with a shout. Sometimes, it arrives in a beige dress, an old Toyota, and a briefcase thicker than someone's ego. If you truly loved me, Marta, you'd sign this without making a scene. Camille said it as calmly as if he were handing her a dessert menu, not a document that would relegate her in their future marriage to a position lower than the doormat. Marta sat opposite him in the restaurant for a few more seconds, though her mind was already elsewhere. Not at the table, not by the candlelight, not with the man in the tailored jacket who, with the smile of a success story, was trying to protect himself from a woman whose fortune he couldn't even accurately count without a calculator and a coffee break. She looked at the briefcase, at its smooth navy cover, at the silver clip holding the documents together, at the signature of a law firm whose name sounded expensive, cold, and supremely confident. I'm not making a scene, she replied softly. Camille smiled with relief. Exactly. And that's why I value you. You're sensible. Sensible. The word had been coming back to her for months, like a badly placed online advertisement. Camille called her sensible when she didn't buy expensive clothes. His mother called her sensible when she agreed to help with family dinners. His friends called her sensible when she sat quietly while they discussed investments, real estate, and real money. In their mouths, sensible meant quiet, undemanding, convenient, someone you could subtly push closer to the wall when the conversation became important. Marta slowly opened the document again. She no longer read everything. Fragments were enough. Assets acquired by Camille before and after marriage remain his sole property. All investments made by Camille remain outside the marital community property. In the event of marital dissolution, Marta Wysocka shall not lodge claims concerning the increase in value of Camille Brzezinski's enterprise. In the event of Marta Wysocka's temporary reduction in professional activity, she is not entitled to any additional financial security. She slid her finger over the last sentence. This wasn't a prenup. It was a bill presented for trust that Camille had never given her. Who prepared this? She asked. My lawyer, Attorney Zawadzki, a very good specialist. I understand, Camille added, leaning slightly over the table. I didn't want to bother you with this earlier. You know how it is. Wedding, emotions, family. But the closer we get, the more seriously we need to think. Marta looked up. We. The word Camille uttered cut through his speech. Yes, we. It's for our own good. Marta looked out the window. On the sidewalk, someone stopped at a crosswalk. A young couple laughed under an umbrella. The girl nudged the boy with her elbow, and he put his arm around her as naturally as if the world had never known the concept of calculation. Marta once wanted that simplicity too, without tests, without hidden conditions, without documents brought to a restaurant between cream soup and the wine bill. And what if I want to change something? She asked. Camille sighed. It was the sigh of a man who had to explain the obvious to someone he felt should be grateful for even being allowed into the conversation. Marta, of course we can talk, but let's not complicate things. Lawyers know what they're doing. Your lawyer knows what he's doing for you. Camille narrowed his eyes. You're starting to sound suspicious. No, I'm starting to read. For a brief moment, His face hardened. It was the first crack in the mask. "I don't like this tone." He said it. Marta closed the document. "And I don't like the clause that says, after the wedding, I can quit my job, support you, manage the household, help with your business, and then walk away with nothing, because everything would formally be yours. But you're not quitting your job now, are you? So why invent problems?" Marta smiled weakly. "Because contracts are written precisely for those moments when problems stop being invented." Camille leaned back in his chair. His fingers tapped the tabletop. Once, twice, 3 times. She knew that gesture. He always did that when someone didn't agree with him quickly enough. "I feel like you're treating me like an enemy," he said. "No, you're the one who brought a document, treating me like a risk." Silence fell. It wasn't loud. There were no slamming doors, raised voices, or tears. But it was in this silence that something between them shifted irrevocably. Camille looked at her with cold calm. "Marta, I really want to marry you, but I need to know that you're not entering this marriage with expectations that exceed your actual position." Actual position. Those 2 words hit her like a stone thrown through a window. Actual position. According to Camille, her actual position was an old Toyota, modest clothes, and the fact that she didn't discuss investments over dinner. Her actual position was what he could see, and since he mostly looked at himself, he saw very little. Marta slowly picked up her handbag from the chair. "You're right," she said. Camille raised his eyebrows. "About what?" "We need to know our actual positions before the wedding." For a moment, he looked pleased. "I'm glad you understand. That's why we'll meet at the law firm with your lawyer and my lawyer." His satisfaction dimmed. "You have a lawyer?" "I do." "Since when?" "For a long time." Camille laughed briefly, but there was a nervous edge to his laughter. "Well, I'll be. I didn't know consultants and those running small shops had their own lawyers." Marta looked him straight in the eye. "There are many things about me you don't know." At those words, Camille fell silent. Perhaps for the first time that evening, he truly heard her. Not as background noise, not as a fiancé to be properly positioned, not as a woman who should be sensible, grateful, and quiet, but as someone who had just drawn a line. Marta stood up from the table. "I'll pay for my part of the dinner," she said. "Stop it. Don't be silly." "I'm not being silly. I just don't want you to accidentally have to cover today's cream soup too." This time, he was the one who didn't know what to say. Marta walked over to the waiter, asked for the bill, and paid with her card. The ordinary one, from her everyday account, which held as much as most people would consider normal savings. Not a black card, not a gold one, not one that impressed people like Camille. She didn't need to impress anyone, not anymore. As she left the restaurant, the cool air hit her face. Posen at night hummed peacefully. As if the city didn't know that just minutes earlier, in an elegant establishment, the slow unraveling of an illusion had begun. Marta headed towards the parking lot. Her old Toyota stood between 2 luxury cars. It looked modest, almost comical. Someone like Camille would see it as proof of mediocrity. Marta saw freedom in it. She got in, closed the door, and sat still for a moment. Then she took out her phone and found the number saved as Advocate Anna Ratajczak. The lawyer answered after 3 rings. "Good evening, Miss Marta. Is something urgent?" Marta glanced through the windshield at the restaurant lights. In one of the windows, she could still see Camille's silhouette sitting at the table, alone, with his briefcase. "Yes," she said calmly. "My fiancé wants a prenuptial agreement." There was a brief pause on the other end. "I understand. Shall I prepare a standard analysis?" Marta rested her head against the headrest. "No. This time I want full financial transparency for both parties." Advocate Ratajczak was silent for a second longer, and then something in her voice emerged that sounded almost like a smile. Does your fiancé know what he's asking for? Marta looked at the restaurant window again. Camille was adjusting his shirt cuff, as if he still believed he was in control. No, Marta replied. And that's precisely why it needs to be recorded very clearly. Please don't be upset, Mr. Camille. Numbers have the advantage of not caring about anyone's ego. Advocate Anna Ratajak said this calmly, almost politely, but a silence fell in the office, as if someone had just opened a window in the middle of winter. Camille Brzezinski sat on the other side of a long, dark conference table and looked at her with the expression of a man who, just moments before, was certain he had come to win. He wore a navy suit, a perfectly ironed shirt, and a watch that shone brighter than his confidence. Beside him sat Advocate Zawadzki, a tall, slender man with a face so still it looked like he had practiced it in front of a mirror in the office elevator. Marta sat opposite. She wore nothing spectacular. A light-colored shirt, simple trousers, her hair tied back low. She looked calm, almost ordinary. So ordinary that Camille, even before the meeting began, allowed himself a smile. I hope we won't make a big battle out of this, he said then, taking off his leather gloves. It's just a formality. Marta simply replied, Of course, a formality. Except her formalities usually involved several binders, deeds and attachments that made people like Camille start to run out of air. The law firm was located on the 5th floor of a modern office building in the center of Poznan. Through the huge windows, one could see the gray sky, bus stops, cars, and people rushing down the street, unaware that a few meters higher, someone's self-perception was about to collide with financial documentation, and such collisions could be worse than a fender bender at the Caponiera roundabout during rush hour. Advocate Ratajak opened the meeting without unnecessary pleasantries. Since we are to discuss a marital property agreement, we need a full picture of both parties' situations. Mr. Camille has agreed to the financial transparency clause. Advocate Zawadzki cleared his throat. Yes, although we consider it quite unconventional. It's rather unconventional to present a fiancé with a document that protects one party as effectively as if the other were planning a bank heist, Ratajak retorted. Camille smiled stiffly. Ms. Advocate, please don't dramatize. It's simply a matter of responsibility. Very well, in that case, let's start with responsibility. Advocate Zawadzki laid out the first folder. Camille's documents were meticulously prepared. The valuation of Mr. Brzezinski's credit consulting firm is 980,000 PLN, his lawyer said. In addition, there is an apartment worth about 700,000, although it is encumbered by a loan. The car is leased. Private savings amount to 140,000 PLN. Liabilities, as you can see, are under control. Marta listened without comment, not because she was surprised. She knew Camille's situation more or less. Sometimes, listening to what he didn't say was enough. Truly wealthy people rarely need to repeat at every dinner that money loves silence. It's most often those whose money has just sent them a final warning from the bank. Camille looked at Marta. As you can see, it wasn't a lack of trust. I simply have something to protect. Marta nodded gently. I see it. The short, I see it, apparently gave him courage. And I hope you now understand why I had to think about this beforehand. We can't pretend we're in identical situations. Advocate Ratajak looked at him over her glasses. That's true. You are not. She uttered those two words so calmly that Camille, for a moment, took them as confirmation of his own thesis. He smiled. I'm glad Ms. Advocate sees it too. Anna Ratajak closed Camille's thin folder and slid it aside. Then she reached for the bag standing by her chair. She took out the first binder, then the second, then the third. A heavy sound of paper echoed on the table. Camille frowned. What is this? Marta replied quietly. My part of the formalities. Advocate Zawadzki straightened up slightly. He suddenly stopped, looking bored. Ratajczak opened the first binder and began to speak in a tone as matter-of-fact, as if she were reading a weather forecast. Ms. Marta Wysocka's assets include a minority stake in the technology company NetBridge Solutions of significant value. In addition, property rights related to an online sales automation system, from which license fees are still being paid. Camille blinked. Hold on. What stake? Advocate Ratajczak did not stop. Then, 4 residential properties in Poznan, 2 in Wrocław, 1 apartment in Gdańsk, and a commercial unit leased for medical practice. Advocate Zawadzki slowly reached for the documents. His face, previously confident and cool, began to lose color. Ms. Marta, he said cautiously, are these deeds current? They are, Marta replied. And the valuations are from last month, Advocate Ratajczak answered. Appraisals are attached. Camille leaned over the table. Marta, what is the meaning of this? She looked at him calmly. What you asked for. Full transparency. Ratajczak opened another binder. Next, an investment portfolio, managed by 2 brokerage houses, funds in bond funds, term deposits, and a liquidity reserve in bank accounts. Reserve, Camille repeated weakly. Yes, the lawyer said. An amount secured for immediate investment decisions, without considering the main assets. Advocate Zawadzki swallowed. What total value are we talking about? Anna Ratajczak placed the last document in the middle of the table. At a conservative valuation, 27,460,000 PLN. The silence that fell after those words was almost beautiful. Not an ordinary, awkward silence, but rather a museum-like silence, the kind where one looks at an exhibit and suddenly understands that they are standing before something greater than they thought. Camille sat motionless. Moments before, he had been a man who came to secure his assets against a modest fiancé. Now he looked like someone who had accidentally walked into a financial mathematics exam, despite having spent his life only posing for business photos. This is impossible, he whispered. For the first time that day, she smiled slightly. It was rather impossible that for 2 years you so desperately wanted to see less in me, that you failed to notice anything more. Camille pushed his chair back. The legs of the furniture screeched across the floor. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to know who I was to you without these documents. This is manipulation. What wasn't manipulation was handing me a prenuptial agreement, written as if I were a threat, and then saying that if I loved you, I would sign it without question. His face turned red. He looked at his lawyer, as if expecting rescue. But Advocate Zawadzki was still leafing through the documents, with the expression of a man who had just discovered he was representing not the millionaire he thought. Camille stood up. I need some air. Please do, Ratajczak said. The numbers won't run away. Camille looked at her sharply, then at Marta. In his eyes, there was no longer certainty, no triumph. There was shame, and something else. The anger of a man who had lost nothing but the illusion that he was bigger. He left the room without a word. The door closed softly behind him. Marta remained at the table, calm as someone who hadn't won the war, but had finally stopped pretending not to see the battlefield. Advocate Ratajczak adjusted her glasses and looked at her more gently. Are you feeling all right? Marta looked at the door for a moment. Yes, she said. Perhaps for the first time in a long time, I feel really good. Through the glass, Poznan continued to live its rhythm. Cars moved off from the lights. People rushed for the trams. The world didn't stop for a second. But for Marta, something had just ended. Not a relationship, not yet the version of herself that allowed someone to mistake her silence for weakness. Do you understand what you've done to me? Camille said it the moment the law firm's doors closed behind them, and the cool hallway air hit Marta's face. He wasn't shouting at full volume yet, because people in suits with laptops tucked under their arms were passing by, their faces conveying the kind of self-importance that made them too respectful of their own time to care about someone else's drama. But there was something worse than a shout in his tone. It was the fury of a man who had lost, not because he was cheated, but because the truth had arrived right on time. Marta walked calmly towards the elevator. She held her purse in her hand, and in her mind, she had silence. Not the painful kind that had grown between her and Camille over the past months with every family dinner, with every joke about her modest capabilities, with every condescending smile from his mother. This was a different silence, the silence after the storm. "Camille, I didn't do anything to you," she said. "You didn't," he scoffed. "You sat there like a queen and watched my lawyer go through your documents, as if you were waiting for this moment." Marta stopped in front of the elevator and turned to him. "I was waiting for the moment you'd stop talking about my real position and see the facts." Camille laughed nervously. The laugh was short, dry, and ugly. It held no amusement. It sounded more like the cracking of a facade. "Facts? The fact is, you humiliated me. It wasn't humiliation that I'm not as small as you wanted me to be." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. The doors slid open, and an older woman with a briefcase stood inside. She glanced at them briefly, and immediately concluded that another couple had decided to break up in the most elegant place they could find on Google Maps. Marta stepped into the elevator. Camille followed. They were silent for 5 floors. He breathed rapidly, looking at his reflection in the metal doors. She saw his face in that reflection, no longer so confident, no longer so smooth. The successful man from family dinners was gone. The one with the leased Mercedes, the watch bought on installments, and the pronouncements delivered, as if each one were destined for a business magazine quote. What remained was a man scared and deeply, deeply offended by reality. Downstairs, they stepped into the lobby. Camille stopped her, with a sudden gesture of his hand, but he didn't touch her. Perhaps he remembered the cameras in the office building. Perhaps he still had that much sense left. "We need to talk," he said. "We've been talking for 2 years, Marta replied. "You're just starting to listen today. Don't turn this around." "Camille, that cat left the bag on its own a long time ago, and it's probably richer than you." His face hardened. "Does this amuse you?" "No, nothing amuses me about this anymore." They walked outside the building. A low, heavy sky hung over Poznań. The sidewalks were wet from a brief rain, and car headlights reflected in the puddles like blurred promises. Marta stood by the curb, waiting for the driver of the ordered car to pull closer. Camille paced a few steps back and forth. Finally, he stopped in front of her. "All right," he said suddenly. "I made a mistake." Marta looked at him intently. It could have been an apology. It could have been. But his eyes weren't searching for her pain. They were searching for an exit. "What mistake?" she asked. "I shouldn't have started with the prenuptial agreement in that way. Maybe the document was too one-sided. It was, but you weren't honest either. I didn't talk about money. That's true. You didn't talk about 27 million, Marta. That's not a forgotten receipt from Wysocka." "I know. So you admit you lied to me?" Marta looked at him for a long time. "I don't admit that I didn't give you information you could have used before I knew who you were without it." Camille's lips tightened. For a moment, he looked as if he were truly wrestling with himself. Perhaps beneath the layers of pride, pretense, and business platitudes, there was still a man who once brought her coffee at work and laughed with her during walks along the Warta River. Perhaps he had truly loved her before he began to love his own image in the eyes of others more. But if that man was there, He didn't emerge. Instead, the other one spoke. "We can fix this," he said. Marta didn't answer immediately. Camille took a breath. Suddenly, his voice became more businesslike, cooler, task-oriented, as if he were presenting a new debt restructuring plan to a client. "We'll sign the prenuptial agreement, but we'll change the clauses. It will be more equitable." "Okay," agreed. "However, we need to establish rules regarding information about your assets." Marta felt something inside her go still. Rules. Yes. Discretion. Full discretion. Nobody needs to know exactly who. Friends, family, my clients, my mother. Marta looked at him without a word. Camille continued, faster and faster, more confidently, as if convincing himself that this was reasonable. "Do you understand how it will look? For 2 years, everyone knew I was taking care of our future, that I had the company, that I was introducing you to a certain lifestyle, and now suddenly, it will come out that you have more than me." "I do." The word was short, calm, and very uncomfortable. Camille winced. "That's not the point." "It is the point. You can't present it like that. People will talk. People always talk, mostly when they have nothing interesting to say themselves. Marta, please." His tone suddenly softened, but there was no tenderness in it. There was desperation. "Let's sign a supplementary agreement, a confidentiality agreement. No discussions about your assets, no disclosures, no situations where anyone puts me in an awkward position." Marta felt a strange calm then. Not pain, not surprise, but calm, because she had just received the answer she had long feared. Camille hadn't asked why she hid the money. He hadn't asked what she was afraid of. He hadn't asked what she felt listening to his remarks, jokes, and condescending comments. For 2 years, he wasn't interested in whether he had hurt her. He was only interested in how he would look. "So you want me to keep pretending I'm poorer than I am," she said. "Not poorer, humbler. No. Humility is when a person doesn't have to shout about what they have. You're asking me for something else. You want me to be smaller so you can look bigger." Camille looked away. That was enough. Marta stepped back. "I won't sign any. Come on, Marta. I won't hide my life so your mother can keep saying I was lucky to have landed you. She doesn't think that. She thinks exactly that. And you let her?" His jaw twitched. "So what? You're throwing us away over one conversation." Marta smiled sadly. "No, Camille. Over hundreds of small conversations where you told me who you thought I was. Today was just the first, where I finally believed I didn't have to agree with it." The car arrived. The driver stopped at the curb. Marta opened the door, but Camille took a step towards her. "Don't leave now. Not after all this." Marta looked at him one last time. He was elegant, handsome. He still looked like a man many people would believe from the first handshake, but she had seen too much already. "You know what's worst?" she asked quietly. "You didn't answer that. If you had said today, 'Marta, I'm proud of you,' I would probably cry with happiness, and you asked me to sign an agreement for your complexes." Camille paled. This time, he had no ready answer. Marta got into the car, closed the door, and gave the driver the address. As the car pulled away, she saw Camille in the rearview mirror, standing on the sidewalk in front of the office building, alone, motionless, with the face of a man who had just understood that you can lose something without a trial, without a divorce, and without shouting. It's enough for someone to stop shrinking. Marta turned her gaze away from the mirror. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was leaving love. She felt like she was returning to herself. She no longer wanted to prove to anyone that she deserved her own life. Marta said this quietly, sitting in the armchair opposite her therapist. Outside, the May rain was falling. The calm, steady kind that doesn't lash against the windows with anger, but rather patiently washes the city's dust after a long day. 4 months had passed since the meeting at the law firm. 4 months since Camille stood in front of the office building, trying to convince her that love could be fixed with a confidentiality agreement. 4 months since the day Marta didn't go back to him after an argument for the first time. Didn't send a message, didn't explain, didn't appease, didn't put herself back together into a version that was easier for someone to accept. It was difficult at first, not because she missed Camille as he truly was. She missed the Camille she had imagined, the man who was supposed to be a safe home after years of childhood filled with arguments about money. A man with whom she would finally not be afraid of being judged by her bank account. A fiancé who would love her for her quietness, simplicity, and normality. Only, he didn't love her quietness. He exploited it. After the breakup, Camille didn't disappear immediately. First, he sent messages, long, chaotic ones, filled with sentences that looked like apologies but smelled of resentment. "Marta, I overstepped, but you should also understand my situation. I didn't want to hurt you. I was just put in an awkward position. My mother is asking what's happening. What am I supposed to tell her?" Marta didn't reply for a long time. Then she wrote just one sentence. "Tell her the truth. It will be a new experience for both of you." He didn't reply. Instead, he started talking to others. First to friends, then to clients, then to people Marta only knew from family gatherings. He told them she stayed with him as a test, that she had been testing him for 2 years, that she had hidden millions to humiliate him, that she had planned everything, that she was cold, calculating, and dishonest. For a while, it hurt. Then the truth did what the truth does best, when given a little time. It came out. First, one of Camille's acquaintances, who remembered him saying at dinner that Marta didn't understand big money, spoke up. Then someone recalled his jokes about her car. Then his former client recounted that Camille had long been living more by image than by actual results. The rumor he tried to cast on Marta returned to him like a poorly packaged parcel, only without the option of returns. Camille's company began to lose clients. Not because Marta did anything, she didn't have to. People themselves began to wonder if they wanted to entrust their money to a man who couldn't handle the fact that his fiancé had more than him. Marta watched it from afar, without satisfaction, with relief. She didn't want his downfall. She just wanted him to stop building himself on her silence. During this time, she bought an old house on the outskirts of Poznan, a small one, with a neglected garden, wooden stairs, and a kitchen that remembered times when tiles had ambitions to be eternal. Every craftsman who came for an inspection said the same thing. "Miss Marta, there's a lot of work here," and she would reply, "I know. That's precisely why I like it." This house was like her. Not perfect, not for show, but with a foundation that couldn't be easily destroyed. One Friday afternoon, she went to the city library for an author's talk about the history of pre-war Poznan. Not because she was particularly interested in old maps and forgotten buildings. She just wanted to get out of the house, sit among people, and for an hour, not think about renovations, lawyers, or the man who mistook love for a financial audit. There she met Tomasz Lewicki. He was a history teacher at a high school. He had a calm voice, slightly disheveled hair, and a jacket that looked like it had been bravely battling chalk, school desks, and the reality of Polish education for years. After the event, they happened to stand next to each other at the book table. "Did you come for the old maps too?" he asked. Marta smiled. "More for an excuse not to sit at home. That's a very good motivation. Historians, too, often pretend it's about maps, when really, it's about tea and people." She laughed, lightly, for the first time in a long time. Then there was coffee, then a walk, then another meeting. Tomasz didn't seem like a man who wanted to conquer her, more like someone who wanted to know her. It was a difference so profound that Marta initially didn't know what to make of it. He didn't ask how much she earned, didn't judge her car, didn't lecture her. When she spoke, he listened, as if her words weren't just a pause between his own. After 3 months of knowing each other, Marta invited him to her house, which was undergoing renovation. They sat in the garden on 2 old chairs, teacups warming their hands. The scent of damp earth and freshly cut grass filled the air. Marta knew she had to tell him the truth. Not because she owed him anything, but because she no longer wanted to build a relationship on fear. "Tomasz," she began, "there's something you should know." He looked at her intently. "It sounds serious, and it is, in a way." She told him everything. About the system she had built, the company, the apartments, the investments, about Camille, the prenuptial agreement, the law firm, about how long she had feared that money would once again destroy something before it could become real. Tomasz remained silent. Marta felt that familiar tightness in her chest. This was it, she thought. She would soon see the change in his eyes. But Tomasz didn't pull away. He didn't grow serious in that strange, cold way. He didn't start calculating her life in his head. He simply smiled softly. "So," he said, "not only are you smart, kind, and stubborn, but you've also built something you can truly be proud of." Marta looked at him, speechless. "And what am I supposed to do?" she asked. "Faint dramatically among the flower beds?" She let out a choked laugh, though her eyes were wet. Tomasz placed his cup on the grass. "Marta, your success doesn't diminish me. Just because you shine doesn't mean I fade." Then she truly cried, not from pain, but from relief. For years, she had feared her strength would be a burden, that she would have to choose between the truth about herself and love, that if she revealed her whole life, someone would deem it too much, too difficult, too inconvenient. And Tomasz simply sat beside her, without fear, without jealousy, without the need to cast his own shadow over her light. A few weeks later, Marta ran into Camille by chance, in the center of Poznań. He was leaving a cafe alone, phone to his ear. He looked good, as always, but different. Less polished, more real, or perhaps just more tired. He saw her. For a moment, they both stood still. "Hi, Camille," Marta said. He looked at her, then at Tomasz, who was waiting a few steps away, with a paper bag full of books. "You look good," he said. "I feel good." It was the simplest, greatest truth. Camille nodded. Perhaps he wanted to say more, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to ask if she was truly happy, but he didn't. Marta didn't wait either. She moved on. Tomasz handed her one of the books. "Everything okay?" Marta looked at the street, at the people, at the lights, at the city that had once been the backdrop to her fear, and was now becoming the backdrop to a new life. "Yes," she replied, "everything is okay." And for the first time, it wasn't an answer for the sake of peace. It was the truth, because Marta finally understood that true love doesn't demand a woman hide her achievements, her money, her talent, or her strength in a drawer. It doesn't tell her to speak softer, shine dimmer, dream more cautiously. True love doesn't ask, "Can you be smaller so I look bigger?" True love says, "Be all of you. I can handle it." And Marta? Marta had no intention of apologizing ever again for living, for building, for earning, for rising up, and finally for walking through life upright. She wasn't a woman of great wealth. She was a woman of great courage. And money? Money was simply proof that she had believed in herself sooner than others had. Marta's story shows that sometimes the hardest part isn't leaving someone who hurts us. The hardest part is admitting to ourselves that for a long time, we let them decide how much we were allowed to matter. Camille didn't lose because of Marta's fortune. He lost because of his own complexes. He wanted a woman who would be a convenient backdrop, an unequal partner. He wanted love, but only the kind that wouldn't tarnish his image. Marta won, not because she was rich. She won because she finally stopped shrinking so someone else could feel big. Because true love isn't afraid of your light. True love sits beside you and says, "Shine on, I won't go out." If this story has touched you even a little, please write in the comments. Did Marta do the right thing by hiding her wealth from Camille? Or do you think everything should be discussed from the beginning in a relationship? Let me know in the comments, because I'm very curious about your opinion. If you enjoy stories about secrets, dignity, difficult choices, and moments when the truth finally comes to light, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Here, stories appear daily that show that sometimes one sentence, one decision, or one folder of documents can change an entire life.